April 1st is a day filled with pranks and hoaxes all over the world, but today I'm gonna focus on the best and the worst April Fool's jokes in Sweden. No one knows when people started to pull pranks on April 1st. In 1508, the French poet Eloy referred to poisson d'avril, the French term for April's fools. It literally means April's fish. But people also speculate that Chaucer may have referred to April's Fool's Day back in 1392 in the Canterbury Tales. Either way, there have been some magnificent hoaxes and pranks since then. For example, in 2008, when the BBC reported that penguins have evolved to learn how to fly. Or when Taco Bell announced in 1996 that they were gonna buy the Liberty Bell and rebrand it the Taco Liberty Bell. Speaking of fast food, Burger King also had a great prank in 1998 when they posted an ad about their left-handed Whopper, especially made for left-handed and gullible people. But one of the greatest pranks of all time has gotta be when the BBC posted a special in 1957 about the spaghetti harvests in Switzerland. They even added actors to pretend to pick spaghetti from trees. Silly people, everyone knows that spaghetti grows underground. It's a root vegetable. All of those are examples of some really good April Fool's jokes from abroad, but let's have a closer look at some really good and some pretty bad pranks in Sweden. In 2016, Carlsberg made a joke that many people wish was true. They advertised a beer pill that you would put into a glass of water and it would magically transform it into a glass of beer. Since Carlsberg tastes like water anyway, it wouldn't make much of a difference. In 2012, the Swedish newspaper Dagens Industri announced that Apple was gonna buy the island Ios from Greece for $20 billion American dollars. I've seen people online who still refer to this as a fact. Apple fanboys will believe anything. Gothenburg has a famous statue of Poseidon at the end of the street Avenyn. In 2011, it was announced that they thought that his naughty bits were a bit too small, so they were gonna enlarge it by 20 centimeters. They did have concerns that this enlargement could give males inferiority complexes, though. And speaking of impressive male members, a newspaper in the north of Sweden announced that a man had become a father of 4 newborns on the same day, but with 4 different women. In the ancient times of the 1980s and the 90s, there wasn't any internet, but there were still lots of April Fool's pranks in newspapers and on TV. In 1988, a telephone pole grower lamented the rise of plastic telephone poles, which were replacing the ones he had been growing by hand for the last 37 years. And in 1989, there was a very serious warning about how certain TV remotes could be used to open locked cars. It's hard to imagine right now, but remote-controlled locks in cars were still a pretty new thing back then, so some people actually fell for it. Something else that was pretty new back in the 80s was microwave ovens. In 1987, the Swedish public television told us how you could grow vegetables quickly and easily in your microwave oven. Apparently it tasted just like a regular radish. Who'da thunk it? The island of Öland in Sweden is connected to the mainland with a pretty massive bridge. In 1997, there came an alarming report that one of the pillars of the bridge had collapsed. This is probably the worst special effects I've ever seen on TV, and I even watched Once Upon a Time. In 1979, you could watch a news report about how environmental activists had closed off big parts of Stockholm because they wanted no cars in the city. There was complete chaos in Stockholm. Maybe this is where Greta Thunberg got some inspiration. And in 1980, the daily newspaper Dagens Nyheter reported about a different type of chaos, because daylight savings time had been introduced 5 days ahead of time, so no one knew what time it actually was. The joke's on them though, no one actually knows what time it is around daylight savings time anyway. Around that time of year, people are so confused for at least a week. Daylight savings time is weird. The first April Fool's joke that was published in a newspaper was in 1846 when the Islington Evening Star announced that there was a donkey show on April 1st. People flocked to the show to see the donkeys, but of course they soon realized that they themselves were the donkeys in question. Sweden has also had some pretty good pranks from a long time ago. In 1911, a newspaper reported that Rajapur would lend 600 elephants to Stockholm for the opening of the Olympic Games. Elephant handlers would ride the elephants while chanting the outlandish-sounding phrase "Lirpa, Lirpa." I wonder what Lirpa is backwards. In 1961, you could see people salvage very interesting items from the Vasa, a famous warship that sank in the Stockholm harbor. The Vasa sank in 1628 and it was preserved in the brackish waters for hundreds of years. These days, you can see the Vasa at the Vasa Museum in Stockholm, but in 1961, the Vasa was just being salvaged. So they decided to make a prank where they found ale and cheese and bread that was preserved inside a sealed chest, still good to eat and drink after 300 years. The year after that, in 1962, there was a very famous joke on TV. Color TVs had been introduced, but they were pretty expensive. But if you took a pantyhose and stretched it across the screen of your old black and white set, then it would magically transform into a color TV instead. There was a huge spike in pantyhose sales after this. Most people probably didn't believe it, but some thought, what if? What if? To be honest, I have no idea if there was a spike in sales or not, I just made it up. But it sounds plausible, doesn't it? In 1964, you were taught that you could do your dishes with ultrasound. That one sounds pretty stupid today, and it probably sounded just as stupid and impractical back then. And let's not forget about the prank where you were shown how you could easily make your own satellite dish using just an old umbrella and aluminum foil. Just imagine all the cheap and stingy dads trying out this one on April 1st. I think I can see an image. Move the umbrella a bit to the left. All April Fool's jokes aren't good though. There have been some pretty bad ones as well in Sweden. In 2020, when the pandemic started to sweep the world, there was an April Fool's joke that people were gonna arrange a demonstration against it. The joke was in pretty bad taste, but everyone just chuckled a bit and thought, well, that would be pretty stupid to gather like that during a pandemic. The irony was complete in 2021 though, when lots of people gathered in Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö to protest against pandemic restrictions. In 2019, there was an announcement that there was a new emergency number you could call in Sweden, 211 instead of 112. It was supposedly easier to dial for left-handed people, and that was a pretty stupid joke. I think that the biggest joke this year is that it's April and Stockholm is still full of snow and ice. We live in Mordor. But other countries have had worse April Fool's jokes. For example, Iraq, where the newspaper Babil published an article saying that US sanctions against Iraq had been lifted. This was back when Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq. That joke was pretty awful and not very funny at all. Also, in the year 2000, the Romanian newspaper Opinia stated that 60 named political prisoners would be set free. Of course, it was all just a cruel joke. The families of those named prisoners ended up waiting outside of the prison until they heard that it was all a prank. They were not amused. Let's end this video on a high note. In 2013, as a joke, Google announced that YouTube, which had been running for 8 years back then, had all been a huge competition. They would now close YouTube and start judging all the videos to determine which is the best video of them all. Thousands of people would be assigned to watch every single clip on YouTube for the next 10 years. YouTube would then be relaunched and the winner would be announced. And do you know what year it is right now? It's 2023. It's been 10 years since Google made that joke, so I wonder who won YouTube. The thing is, they actually did announce a winner, and I have the link to the video right here. I'm gonna keep talking for a few seconds now, so you have time to pause this video and write down the URL. I hope you'll be as surprised as I was. And there you have it. Those were some of the best and worst April Fool's jokes in Sweden. I hope you had as much fun as I had looking them up. Either way, like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. Now you should check out this video as well for something equally ridiculous, if that's possible.